The dungeon's narrow passage had transformed into a war corridor. Adventurers formed two long lines on either side, relentlessly battling the goblins and kobolds that emerged from the corridors, the cracks in the walls, and the lower slopes. The monsters advanced like an endless tide, but were held back by shields raised by beastmen, dwarven hammers crushing skulls, spells cast by mages, and arrows cutting through the air. In the center of this carefully controlled chaos, Bel and his companions ran without fighting, protected by that living wall. Hestia's voice echoed to the oculus on Bel's gauntlet, urgently explaining that this was not a natural phenomenon of the dungeon, but a false well created by the adventurers themselves. An artificial path, forged by force, directly connecting the official route to the deep floors. The revelation hit Bel hard. That entire army was there only to clear a path. The families of Oreo had united, transforming the dungeon into a field of desperate cooperation, where each combatant on the fringes sacrificed safety so that the main force could advance intact. As he ran, Bel noticed the details. Low-level adventurers, even those who would normally never descend so deep, displayed plates with the shield symbol, defending the route. The main force, marked as sword, was small and selective. Everything made sense now. The calm of the city, the absence of nearby allies, the time he had been given to rest. While he prepared, others were already fighting, building that path with sweat and blood. The operation was grand, reckless, and fragile, an artificial well sustained by human lives, created to quickly take them to the 60th floor before time, or the dungeon itself, crushed them. The full understanding of the plan fell upon Bel like an overwhelming weight, too dense to ignore. The master made it clear that reaching the 60th floor in just one day was no victory at all. It was merely the intermediate point on a much larger and infinitely more cruel mission. Rescuing the Loki Familia was not enough. The true test would be to return. Each step taken toward the depths created a debt with all those who remained behind, supporting the artificial pit with their own bodies. The main force and the defense units were linked by the same fragile thread of destiny. If the retreat failed, the dungeon would make no distinction. It would swallow both those who advanced and those who remained fighting on the banks, transforming that collective effort into a mass sacrifice. As he ran, Bel felt this weight in every cry that echoed around him. Hoarse voices offered desperate encouragement. Reports shouted in the midst of combat. Curses spat out between blows. They were sounds laden with blood, sweat, and exhaustion, coming from adventurers who knew exactly what was at stake. There was no romanticized heroism there, only raw resistance. The artificial well had a time limit, and everyone knew it. Every wasted second made that living line thinner, more unstable, close to collapse. It wasn't a simple race to the bottom of the dungeon, but a crossing over an invisible abyss, where hesitation meant being dragged to death along with everyone else. Under the suffocating pressure, Bel's doubts threatened to resurface, tightening his chest and making his breathing heavy. But then beside him, he met the firm gaze of the amber-haired fairy. There were no words, no grand gestures, just that deep, resolute look, which said everything that needed to be said. A's and the others were waiting. They believed. That in itself was enough. Bel took a deep breath, feeling the fear turn into fuel and harden his own determination. For the people who sustained the path with their own lives, for those who awaited in the depths of the dungeon, he would run to the limit of his body and soul, determined not only to arrive, but to return faster, stronger, and without leaving anyone behind. As the main force advanced at absurd speed to the dungeon, on the subterranean surface the effort took its toll. Hestia, exhausted after traveling the chariot at full speed, ran desperately toward the guild altar, fighting for breath to avoid falling behind. Even having set off as fast as possible, the distance between gods and adventurers was brutal. Bel and the others had already traversed half of the upper floors, forcing Hestia to surpass her own limits to maintain the connection as an operator. In the underground altar, the tension was different, but no less intense. Loki greeted her with shouts, impatient and consumed by contained anxiety, while Uranus watched in silence, seated on a stone throne. Hephaestus showed exasperation. Hermes maintained his usual lightness, and Balder smiled serenely. Between them, an unexpected and overwhelming presence emerged, Freya, not disguised as an ordinary tavern keeper, but as the goddess of beauty herself, still wearing the simple uniform that contrasted shockingly with her dominant aura. Undeterred by the criticism or the general fatigue, Freya assumed control with absolute ease. Opening communication through the Oculus, she gave direct orders to her family, adjusting the advance of Van's chariot and repositioning her forces before the intermediate floors. Even in the face of the resistance and displeasure of her followers, her authority imposed itself effortlessly. While the infernal race continued in the depths of the dungeon, the gods, each in their own way, moved the final pieces of this desperate plan, aware that time was running out for everyone, mortals and deities alike.